The sirens cut through the evening air, red and blue, washing over my wife's face, over the man at her side, over the trees that swayed like they were trying to look away. I stood a few paces back, breathing slow, my hands open, my voice steady. I had practiced that steadiness in my head again and again until it stopped shaking. Stop lying to me. That baby isn't mine. She flinched. The man blinked. The officers glanced at each other. My son stood to my right, small and straight, 10 years old, jaw set. He didn't say a word, but I could feel his presence like an anchor, holding me to the ground. I am Adam Stone, 35, and this is how we got here, though I wish there had been an easier road. It began with a message, not the kind of message you frame, and keep the kind that tears the frame in half. I was at work, irregular afternoon emails in a neat row, tasks in their places. Then hers arrived, 3 lines, almost polite. I'm sorry. I've fallen in love with someone else. I'm starting over with him. I'm taking the camper van and I moved the money. Please don't call. There was a short silence in my head. Then the world came back loud and unkind. I called anyway. She picked up and her voice was flat, like a room with no windows. It's done. Adam, don't make this harder. I'll file the papers. You focus on Ryan. The line went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand, listening to nothing. The van was gone. The loan was in my name. The savings, $20,000 wiped clean. The future, the little plans you stack like cups all on the floor. For a few days I moved like a ghost, work sliding off me, food turning to dust in my mouth. I kept the house quiet, as if silence could keep the truth from waking up. But truth has its own alarm clock, and it never needs batteries. I remember the afternoon my chest went tight, the lights whited out, the floor rose up to meet me. I woke under hospital fluorescence, listening to a monitor that didn't care who I was. The doctor, calm and kind, said the word exhaustion, said the word stress, said I needed to stop pretending that my body was a vault. I nodded, because nodding is easy when your heart is busy counting its steps. Back home the house felt different. Not smaller, not bigger, just off, like someone had moved the front door 3 inches to the left. I stood in the kitchen and stared at a mug, then at the window, then at the place on the wall where our wedding photo had been. I had taken it down without thinking, the way you move your hand away from a hot stove. Ryan found me there. He didn't clear his throat, he didn't shuffle his feet, he just walked in like he belonged in every room I would ever stand in. Dad? Is Mum gone? I tried to smile, the kind of smile you give when you want to protect a child from the edge of the world. He looked straight at me, and he is only 10, but in that look there was more truth than I had been willing to hold. Don't. Please. Don't lie to me. I sat. He sat. I told him what I could, and I left out what I couldn't, but he had already seen most of it written in the empty spaces. He listened, quiet hands on his knees, thinking the way he always thinks, like a chess player who can hear the board. When I finished, he inhaled slow and controlled and said something I didn't expect. Then we take it back. The van, the money, the truth. I wanted to tell him that life doesn't work that way, that there are doors you cannot open once they are closed, but the words died before they reached my tongue. He was still looking at me, steady, present. I can find her dad. I frowned, not because I doubted him, but because I needed a reason to stand up again. How? He leaned closer, lowered his voice like he was about to share a magic trick that runs on logic instead of miracles. Remember the hike the day I got lost? I didn't get lost. I wanted the kid phone, the one with GPS, so you and Mom would stop worrying. We installed the same app on her phone too, remember? Family tracking, you said. I can see where she is. I stared at him, at the slight smudge of graphite on his thumb, from the math worksheet he had done earlier, at the tiny scar on his eyebrow from when he fell off his scooter at 6, at a boy who was a boy. And also something else, something like a compass. You planned that? The phone? He shrugged a little smile, cutting through the heavy air. I planned a lot of things, hoping I'd never need them. That night, we sat at the table with paper and pens the way you do when you don't want to forget anything. He opened the app. The map lit up a small moving dot, a name I had stopped saying out loud. She had been travelling, not far, not fast, but enough to stay ahead of a man who didn't want to chase. Ryan wrote headings like he was building a case. Evidence, timeline, recovery. Language of the law mixed with the language of a child who refuses to give up his father to grief. First, we stabilize you with food, sleep, no more collapsing. Okay? Then we document what happened. Get the bank statements, the loan papers, the emails. Then we talk to the police. But not yet. We go where the dot stops. We ask for the keys to the van. We make it simple. If they refuse, we call. He looked at me, and I realized I had been holding my breath. Dad. We are not victims unless we decide we are. I laughed quietly because he had stolen the line I used to say to him when he tripped over a spelling test. He smiled back, and for the first time since the message, the room felt like a room again, not an accusation. The next morning, I ate oatmeal eggs, toast. It tasted like an apology to my own body. Ryan slid a glass of water toward me, read out a list he had written, made me repeat the important parts. Identification, registration, loan agreement, bank, screenshots, the email, the date, the time. He had put little boxes next to each item, and he made me check them one by one, like I was back in school and this was a science project that ends with justice. We rehearsed what I would say. Not angry, not wild, just plain. This is my name. This is my property. This is my son. This is the loan. This is the account. These are the withdrawals. Here is the email. We practiced the pauses, the places where I would breathe, where I would let the silence do the work. In the afternoon, we drove not far out of the city, into a park with long trees and a campground that smelled of pine and propane. The dot had stopped moving. Ryan watched the screen, then looked up at the world outside the windshield, then back at me. She's here. We parked a little away, not hiding but not intruding either. The van was impossible to miss. The same dent near the rear bumper, the same tiny scrape on the side panel from the time I misjudged the garage, the same sticker Ryan had put on the back window, a small rocket pointing at the sky. My hands trembled, not from fear, not exactly, but from the weight of the moment. Ryan reached over, touched my wrist, a light touch grounding. Steady, like we practiced. I nodded, and we walked. The campground was a mix of weekend joy and weekday regret, couples laughing, a radio, far off a child crying because the marshmallow fell into the fire. The ordinary world moving on while ours tried to find its balance. We saw them before they saw us. She sat on a folding chair, sunglasses on, hair pulled back. The man crouched by a grill, poking at coals that didn't want to cooperate. My chest tightened, and then loosened, and then settled. I stepped forward. She looked up, and her face did a strange thing, a sequence of expressions that didn't agree with each other. Surprise, annoyance, calculation. The man stood, wiped his hands on a paper towel, tried to look taller. "Adam, why are you here?" My voice worked. Calm, clear. "The van is in my name. The money you moved out of our account was mine. I'm here for both." She scoffed a little too loud. "You can't just show up like this. We're talking to a lawyer. We'll sort it out later." Ryan stepped up beside me, chin lifted. We tried. Later didn't call us back. She looked at him, something like guilt, something like anger. The man crossed his arms the way men cross their arms when they don't know what else to do. "We're leaving. Now." "No," I said, and I surprised myself with how soft it sounded, how final. "You're going to hand me the keys, and you're going to talk about the money. And if you don't, I'll call the police, and we'll let the papers talk instead." The air went still. She reached for her bag, then stopped. The man muttered something about property, about marriage, about how this wasn't theft, this was just borrowing. Ryan shook his head, almost amused. "Borrowing requires consent. That's what my teacher says." She dropped the sunglasses into her lap, pressed a hand to her temple, said my name again, as if my name could change the facts. I watched her breathe, quick, shallow. I watched myself from the outside, a man who had decided, finally, to stand where he was. Then her phone buzzed, and something in her face broke. She glanced at her screen, and a flicker of panic crossed the surface. The man noticed, took a step closer to her, looked at the screen, swore under his breath. I didn't know what the message said, but I knew the feeling of a lie that has run out of road. "Keys," I said, and held out my hand. She hesitated, fingers digging into the pocket of her jacket, and for a second I thought she would throw them, make a scene, call it all unfair. Instead, she dropped them into my palm, a small metallic surrender. The weight of them didn't fix anything, but it was a start. Ryan exhaled slow. He turned his head, scanning the campground, the parking lot, the road that led in. His eyes locked on something behind me, and he tugged my sleeve just once. "Dad!" "Look." I turned, and the red and blue found us painting the trees, the tables, the van, my hands. A ranger truck rolled in, and behind it, a cruiser, quiet, patient. Someone had called, maybe a neighbor, maybe a camper who didn't like the tone of our voices, maybe the universe, finally on time. The officers stepped out, measured and professional. I felt Ryan straighten the way a boy straightens when the test he studied for finally lands on his desk. I took a breath-tasted pine and smoke and the bright edge of fear. "Good evening," I said, and my voice held. "Good evening," the taller officer replied, eyes taking in the van, the keys in my hand, the faces the way the man's jaw was clenched too hard. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," I said, and I paused, because a pause is a comma for the soul. There's a van in my name. There's money from my account, and there's a message. And I have the papers. He nodded slow, inviting me to continue to build the bridge one plank at a time. And that is when the second truth came to the surface. Not the legal one, not the bank one, but the one that would change the way every face in that clearing looked at every other face. She pressed a hand to her stomach almost unconsciously, and the taller officer noticed, then looked back at me. "Sir, is there anything else we should know?" I looked at my son, at his steady eyes, and the words found their way, not angry, not cruel, just true. "Only this. The baby. It isn't mine." The air shifted like the weather had decided to turn. The man cursed quietly and took a half step away from her, the kind of step a person takes when gravity has forgotten its job. She closed her eyes, as if darkness could keep the world from seeing her. The officer's pen hovered over his notebook, waiting. Ryan didn't look away. He didn't fidget, he didn't swallow hard, he didn't try to be smaller. He just stood there next to me, 10 years old, not a victim, not a bystander, not an ornament. My son, my compass. The officer cleared his throat. "All right, let's take this one piece at a time." I nodded and tightened my grip on the keys, on the proof, on the line I would not step back from. The trees whispered overhead. The campground went quieter. The world narrowed to a circle of light and breath and truth. And that is where part 2 begins. With the law, with the facts, with the kind of honesty that hurts and heals at the same time. The sirens arrived without haste, as if the evening had called them politely red and blue, washing the pines, the picnic tables, the side of my camper van. My wife stood beside a folding chair, one hand on her stomach, the other clenched around nothing. The man near her tried to look taller, then tried to look harmless, then settled on looking lost. I stood a few paces away, my son at my side, 10 years old, steady as bedrock. "Stop lying to me," I said, and my own voice surprised me low, and even as if it had been training for this moment. "That baby, it isn't mine." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The man breathed through his teeth. The officers looked from face to face, cataloguing the shapes of a family that had come apart in public. Ryan didn't speak, but his fingers brushed my sleeve, a small reminder that I was not alone. Not tonight, not anymore. I am Adam Stone, 35, father of one owner of a loan I did not take for myself, owner of a van that did not sleep in my driveway, owner of a silence that had become too heavy to carry. If you want to know how we ended up here, you need the first domino, the one that looked like an ordinary day. It was an email. Not a long email, not dramatic, no metaphors, no apologies, that could actually hold weight. 3 lines. "I'm sorry. I've fallen in love with someone else. I'm starting over with him. I took the van and the saving. Please don't call." I called anyway. Of course I did. Her voice was flat, like a hallway with all the doors closed. "It's done. Adam, I'll file the papers. I can't do this anymore." Focus on Ryan. Then nothing. Just the kind of silence that sits in your ear and refuses to move out. There are different kinds of loss. The loud kind that makes you fall to your knees. The sneaky kind that lets you think you are fine while it empties your pockets. And the kind that changes the color of your house without asking the walls. In the next hours, each kind took a turn. I checked the account because hope is stubborn and watched the numbers evaporate. $20,000 gone the van. Somewhere on a map, I didn't yet know how to read my name. Still on the loan because love makes fools, and banks make records. For 2 days I tried to be a ghost that could still make coffee, a shadow that could still answer emails. I failed at both. On the 3rd day, my legs forgot the script, my chest tightened like a fist, and the office lights went white. I woke in a hospital bed with a monitor beeping the word human, 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 and a doctor saying stress, rest, food, water. No, you are not a machine. I nodded. Then I went home to a kitchen where a mug waited by the sink, and a wedding photo was accidentally missing from the wall. Ryan found me staring at the empty space. He didn't ask me to be strong. He didn't offer the kind of comfort that insists the fire is warm. He just stood there, then sat, then spoke. "Dad, is Mom gone?" I tried a smile. It collapsed on the way up. "Don't lie to me," he said, soft, not angry, please. I told him. Not everything, not the parts that were only mine to carry, but enough. He listened. He has always been a listener, the kind of kid who reads beyond the assignment, who notices when a teacher changes her shoes at lunch, who remembers where the spare batteries live. When I finished, he watched the window for a long breath, then turned back to me with a sentence I didn't expect. "Then we take it back. The van, the money, our life." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the world had just offered me a rope and I had almost missed it. He continued before I could protest. "I can find her. I already can." How I said careful, because careful felt like survival. "Remember the hike," he said, and a small smile cut through the heavy air the day I got lost. I didn't, not really. I wanted the kid phone with GPS,
You and Mom installed the same app on your phones. You said family safety. I can see where she is. She's been moving around not far, but enough. I blinked. I saw him, truly saw him, not just as a boy who loved rockets and riddles, but as a map with a compass that pointed home. You planned that, the phone. I planned a lot of things, he said, and shrugged, hoping I'd never need them. We sat at the table with paper and pens because history loves paper.
He wrote headings in big letters, slow and neat: evidence, timeline, recovery. He drew little boxes next to each item like a checklist from a small commander. First, he said, and slid a glass of water toward me, you eat and sleep, and we get your strength back. Then we gather what proves the truth. Bank statements, the loan agreement, the title, the email. Then we go where the dot stops. We try to keep it civil. If they refuse, we call the police. It sounded simple because simple is how courage introduces itself. I wanted to cry, not from sadness, but from relief, so pure it burned. Dad, we're not victims unless we choose to be. I repeated the line back to him because I had taught it to him once, and he had been patient enough to hand it back when I forgot. The next morning he made oatmeal and eggs, and I ate both like an apology to my body. We checked boxes: identification, registration bank, screenshots, dates, times the unspectacular email that had undone a decade. We practiced what I would say: this is my name, this is my property, this is my son. We practiced pausing because a pause is a place for truth to breathe. By noon, the dot stopped moving. A state park 28 minutes away, a campground with a lake, tall trees, a kiosk where someone in a uniform checked reservations with a pen. We parked under shade, like people who had come to make peace. I recognized the van before I saw her. The dent by the rear bumper, my mistake. The small scrape on the panel, also mine. The rocket sticker Ryan had begged to place, pointing up, always up. The campground was busy with ordinary. A radio somewhere playing a song about forever, a child crying over a fallen marshmallow, a couple in their 60s arguing gently about how many logs made a fire that was not a joke. We walked the way you walk toward a thing you cannot avoid. She looked up and did the expression: dance, surprise, calculation, annoyance, like her face had hired too many actors. The man stood, wiped his hands on a paper towel, tried to become a wall. I stood 5 feet away where voices carry, but hands do not. The van is in my name, I said steady. The money you took was mine. I am here for both. She laughed a sound with no humor in it. You cannot just show up. We will talk to a lawyer. We will sort it out later. Ryan stood a half step in front of me, like a shield that fit inside a backpack. We tried later, he said. Simple as math. Later never called us back. The man crossed his arms because he did not know what to do with them. Look, he said, you two need to calm down. We are leaving. No, I said, and the word arrived like a stone that had finally stopped rolling. You will hand me the keys, and we will discuss the money. Here, or with the police. The world did that small stillness it does when something true enters it. Her hand went to her bag, then stopped. The man mumbled about marriage, about community property, about how this was not theft, it was borrowing. Ryan shook his head like a teacher who will not lower the bar. Borrowing requires consent, he said, and the man looked away. She pressed a palm to her stomach without thinking. It was a small gesture, and it changed the shapes of the officer's eyes. He had arrived without a siren, a ranger in a truck, then a cruiser behind him. He saw the keys, the van, the way our voices were careful, the way the man's jaw was too tight. Evening, he said, and I exhaled the word, back evening. Is there a problem, he asked, eyes already adding the numbers. Yes, I said, and I let the pause happen. There is a van registered to me. There is money. From my account, there is this message, and there are the papers. I handed him the neat stack, the small history of a small crime. He read, he nodded, he turned to her. Ma'am, do you dispute any of this? We were going to talk to a lawyer, she said, voice flat then breaking. I wanted to do this right. The officer glanced at the man, then back. He says, borrowing the officer, said almost bored, but property in his name is not a library. Without consent, that is theft. The word landed, theft, not a misunderstanding, not the weather, theft. Ryan's voice folded into the air, quiet, sharp. You left us. You stole from us. You are still stealing right now. She flinched. Not because the words were cruel, they were not. Because they were true, and truth is heavier than most people expect. The officer asked another question, one that lived in the space her hand had been guarding. How far along are you? 3 months, she whispered. Like if the number stayed small, it would be less real. The math is merciless. 3 months ago, she was still at our table, still telling me traffic had teeth, still tucking Ryan in, with a kiss that evaporated at the hallway. The man's face did the thing faces do when the floor tilts. 3 months, Ryan said, tilting his head, but you met him 3 months ago. So, how? The man stepped back, then forward, then back. His hands made small, empty circles in the air. Wait, what are you saying? Is it mine or not? She looked at the ground because the ground has no eyes. The answer filled the silence without needing a voice. He cursed a small, ugly word, pulled his arm away when she reached for it. You used me, he said, not loud, but it cut anyway. You made me burn a bridge. For a lie? The officer cleared his throat, the kind of sound that reopens a room. All right, he said, keys to the owner. Statements taken. You two need to come with us. Theft, misappropriation of funds. We can let a detective sort the rest. The campground did an imitation of minding its own business. A few phones were out, pointed down, not recording, pretending to be better than that. A grey sedan rolled in, slow and parked crooked. An older couple stepped out and the air changed temperature. Her parents. Ryan had called them 2 days ago, used a tone that made adults listen. You have shamed us, her father said, and it was not performative. It was a verdict. We do not know this daughter. Her mother's mouth was a thin line. You fix this yourself, she said. We are done cleaning up your mess. The man swallowed hard enough to be seen. The officer did not need to tell him to get in the car. He got in the car. The keys dropped into my palm. Metal, light, heavy, both. I closed my hand and felt the first click of 1,000 that would rebuild something like a life. Ryan let out a breath he had been holding since we turned off the highway. We gave our statements at the ranger station, not long, not dramatic, just facts, in order like a shelf. The officers did their job the way good people do their jobs, without speech, without triumph. When we stepped back into the evening, the trees were still tall and the air still smelled like pine. And for the first time since the email, I felt taller than my shadow. We drove home in the van, not fast, not slow, careful, present. Ryan adjusted the seat to his liking, then adjusted it back, then looked at me with a grin that said everything a boy cannot say out loud. See? Said soft, we took it back. I laughed, a sound that felt like oxygen, then focused on the road, on the way the tires hummed, on the small miracle of going in the right direction. Days have a way of pretending they were always going to be fine. These did not pretend. They asked for work. I sold the van to a family that wanted to put stars in their rear window. I walked the buyer through the dent, through the scrape, through the way the stove in the kitchenette sometimes played shy, We shook hands, I paid the loan, I watched a number go to zero and felt a weight go with it. With a lawyer's help, I sent letters that were not threats, just well-lit rooms. The bank returned the 20,000 because banks do not love drama, they love paper. The court insisted on child support. That would be a line item if it ever came, but I had already done the math without it. The man who had tried to be a wall found work a few cities over. My wife signed papers with a pen that did not tremble. I did not ask her why. Some questions do not fix anything when answered. Ryan and I made a new house inside the old house. We learned a recipe for Tuesday nights that tasted like calm. We went to the farmer's market and bought too many apples, then made a pie with a crust that fought us and lost. He did dishes without me asking. He set timers for my medication because doctors had given me a plan and he respected plans. Sometimes he would look up from an article about Jupiter's storms and say, "Out of nowhere, I'm proud of you." I would pretend it was nothing, then fail at pretending. We built rules, not heavy ones, just lines we agreed to honor.
"No reading after 10 unless it is poetry," he declared, and I asked when he had started liking poetry. He said he liked the way some words feel when you say them slow. I said I liked the way he looked at the world like it owed him answers. He blushed. He does not like compliments that make him the main character. He asked about forgiveness, not in a Sunday way, in a Tuesday afternoon way. "Do you forgive her?" he said, handing me a cup of tea like he was handing me the right tool for the job.
"I forgive the part of her," I said, watching the steam that was trying to escape something I did not understand. "I do not forgive the part that broke what she did not own." He nodded like he was filing that away. "Do you forgive him?" "The man," I said, and shrugged. "I think he has enough of his own to carry. I don't need to add my judgment to his load." He liked that answer. He likes it when burdens are measured. We went to a counseling session once just to see if a professional could rearrange the furniture in our heads. The therapist had soft hands and a way of asking questions that felt like an invitation rather than an interrogation. She told us, grief is not a straight road. It is a small town with too many circles. She told me my body would forgive me if I fed it on time. She told Ryan he was allowed to be a child, even if he had saved his father's life. He nodded, then asked if there was homework. She laughed. She gave us 3 things to try. We tried them. 2 stuck. On Saturdays, we took walks that had no destination, just sidewalks and the promise of sandwiches at the end. He told me secrets he had not told me when I was too busy being fine. He had liked a girl in his class who loved spiders and refused to let anyone kill them. He had felt sick the night his mother did not come home and had hidden it behind a video about space. He had decided at 8 that he would be a person who ran toward a problem if no one else did. I told him I had once wanted to be a carpenter, that I had loved the way wood forgives mistakes if you sand carefully. I told him I had loved his mother once, and that love had been real, even if it did not survive the weather. He absorbed the data without commentary. He is good at that. We saw her twice in the months that followed, once outside a courthouse with a stack of papers and a look that said she was learning the price of the ladder she had chosen. Once at the grocery store aisle, 7 cereals and sugar. She glanced at us at him at the way he walked a little ahead, and then stopped to wait for me at the way our cart had a list that was organized by aisle because he is efficient. She opened her mouth and closed it again. We nodded. Not unkind, just human. Then we turned down the next aisle and bought oranges.
"I do not have a neat bow for you." Life did not suddenly applaud, but the applause is not the point. What we had to do, we did. What we had to become, we became. I still wake sometimes at 3 and listen to the house like it is a poem I have not memorized yet. I still check the locks twice, not because I think danger is waiting, but because the ritual tells my bones they can sleep. I still feel an ache near the place where a ring used to sit. It is not a wound anymore.
It is a scar, and scars are proof that skin learned. There is a picture on the wall where the wedding photo used to be. It is the van the day before I sold it, sunlight on its side, the rocket sticker, bright. Ryan standing with one hand on the door, like a boy who knew how to open things carefully. People ask why I kept a picture of a machine that almost ruined me. I tell them it did not ruin me. It delivered us to a parking lot where we told the truth out loud. It carried us home when we needed to drive something back into our lives that had left. It was the scene partner in a story where a child taught a man to be brave in sentences, not in shouting. Sometimes Ryan will sit at the table, homework done screen dark, and he will say out of the blue, "Do you think we are happy?" I will consider the question like a letter that deserves a real reply. I think we are honest, I say, and honest is how happy starts. He will nod, and he will draw a small box next to the word, and he will check it, and the sound of the pen on paper will be for a second the sound of applause. I lost a wife. I found a son I had not fully met. I found a version of myself that eats breakfast and uses silence carefully. I found that love, the kind that pulls up a chair and draws a map, does not threaten to leave if the weather turns. It stays. It puts a hand on your sleeve in a campground and says, "Steady like we practiced." It teaches you to say the line you have been afraid to say. "Stop lying to me, the baby that isn't mine." That was the sentence that opened the door. What came next was not revenge. It was a return to dignity, to ordinary, to the kind of quiet that you earn by staying. We took back the van, we took back the money, but more than that, we took back our name. Stone. A thing that does not move just because someone hopes it will. On the night, everything began to make sense. We made toast and jam at 11 because bedtime is a suggestion when a chapter closes. Ryan leaned against the counter, eyes bright questions resting for once. "Dad," he said, "when I am older, will I remember this as the worst year or the best year?" I thought, not long. "You will remember it as the year we told the truth, and the year the truth told us who we are." He smiled a little, one the kind that stays in the room long after the person leaves. We clinked our toast like two kings with very cheap crowns. We chewed. We did not talk about the future. We let the present be a chair that held. Outside, the world kept doing what it does: buses, breathing dogs, negotiating, neighbors deciding morning would come, whether they slept or not. Inside, a boy and his father finished a small meal that tasted like arrival. We turned off the lights. We checked the locks. We stood at the window and watched the street do nothing important. And then we walked down the hallway, slow, unhurried, alive. And when he closed his door, he said the last line, the only line that matters when the credits roll. "Good night, Dad. Good night, son." And the house finally believed us.